Wyoming Territory, January 1883. The wind cut like a blade through the high plains, and Isaiah Oakley almost missed the barrel half buried in snow beside the trail. His horse, a thick-coated buckskin, stopped short, blowing steam into the cold as Isaiah narrowed his eyes. Something about the shape was wrong. Barrels did not hunch like that. They did not breathe. He swung down fast, boots crunching through the frost. Snow crusted the rim of the barrel, but inside, God Almighty, he muttered, stripping off his gloves. A woman. Half frozen, her lips blue and blood at her temple. Her fingers were curled stiff, and her clothes ragged, soaked, not near enough for this kind of cold, were stuck to her skin. Isaiah dropped beside her, reached to check her pulse, then flinched when her eyes snapped open. They were wild, gray as the sky above, and locked on him with a kind of fire he had not seen in years. Her cracked lips moved. "Give me a gun." Isaiah blinked. "You need a fire and a doctor." She tried to sit up, but her body gave out and she slumped against the side of the barrel. "Gun first." "Please?" He did not give her one, but he did wrap her in his coat, lifted her into his arms, and got her onto the horse. She was light, too light. Like she had not eaten in days, he rode hard for his cabin, tucked in a draw near the Powder River. The sky was turning purple when he kicked the door open and carried her in, laying her down on the cot by the stove. She was unconscious again, and he worked through the night stripping off her wet clothes, wrapping her in dry blankets, heating broth, rubbing warmth back into her limbs. She woke once, shivering so bad he could barely understand her. "Not safe," she rasped. "They will find me." Isaiah frowned, brushing damp hair out of her face. "Who?" Her eyes closed again, but her jaw clenched. "He took my sister." Then she passed out. Her name was Willa Edgeworth. She said it 2 days later when she could finally sit up without blacking out. Her voice was rough, but full of grit. Isaiah stirred the stew and nodded. "Willa, you want to tell me why I found you freezing to death in a barrel?" She looked at him over the rim of the mug he had given her. "You going to give me a gun yet?" "No." "Then I do not owe you anything." He sat across from her, arms folded. "You said your sister was taken." Willa's mouth went hard. "His name is Randall Greaves. He runs a crew. Robbery, cattle theft, worse. He killed my father. Took my sister, Mora. She's 16. Jesus. I tracked them from Kansas into Wyoming. I got too close. They caught me near Sheridan, thought they killed me, left me in that barrel." Isaiah stared at her, something burning low in his chest. "You were going to take them on by yourself." "I had a plan," she snapped. He did not argue, he just said, "You are not going after them alone." She looked at him then, really looked. "Why do you care?" Isaiah met her eyes. "Because I have lost people too." She did not ask who, he did not say. 2 days later, Willa stood on the porch of his cabin, wrapped in one of his coats. Her skin was no longer pale, her eyes were clear. She had not asked for the gun again, but he knew she still wanted it. Isaiah came up behind her with a tin cup of coffee. She took it, their fingers brushing. "They're camped near the old mining trail east of here," she said quietly. "I saw the smoke 2 days before they caught me." Isaiah nodded. "We will ride out at first light tomorrow." Willa turned toward him, disbelief flickering in her face. "You do not even know me." "No," he said. "But I know what it is to feel helpless. I will not let that happen to you again." She blinked fast, then looked away. "I do not know how to say thank you." "Do not. Just let me help." They left before dawn. Isaiah brought 2 rifles and the faster horse. Willa rode behind him, arms wrapped around his middle. He could feel the tension in her, but she did not speak. By midday, they found the trail. Isaiah stopped on a ridge, glassed the valley below with his spyglass. Smoke curled from a camp tucked between rocks. 3 men, he said. "No sign of your sister." "She will be there. She is small. They keep her tied up." Isaiah's jaw clenched. "We will get her." They moved down slow, circling wide. Isaiah gave Willa the pistol. She checked the chamber like someone who had done it before. "Stay behind me," he said. "I will not," she replied. He gave her a long look. She did not back down. They waited until the sun dropped low, shadows stretching. Then they moved. It was fast. One man at the fire, another sleeping, the third off watering the horses. Isaiah took the first two in seconds. Willa found her sister in a canvas tent, wrists bound, eyes red and wide. Willa, Mora sobbed, throwing herself into her sister's arms. Isaiah stepped in, covering them while Willa cut the ropes. When they stepped out, the last man came running back, gun in hand. Willa raised the pistol. She did not hesitate. The shot rang out. The man dropped, just like that it was over. Back at the cabin, Mora slept in Isaiah's bed, curled under 3 quilts. Willa stood by the fire, arms crossed, staring into the flames. Isaiah watched her. "You did it." She nodded once. "We did it." He stepped closer. She did not move away. "You could go now," he said quietly. "Take her home." Willa looked up at him. "There is no home left, not really." Isaiah's voice was low. "You could stay." She stared at him for a long moment, then stepped forward. Her hand found his. Her fingers slid between his like they belonged there. "I want to," she whispered. He leaned down, brushed his lips over hers. It was not rushed. It was not desperate. It was right. When they pulled apart, Willa smiled for the first time since he had met her. A real smile. "I think I started falling in love with you when you refused to give me a gun," she said. Isaiah grinned. "I think I started falling in love with you when you asked for one." And in that quiet cabin, with the fire glowing and her sister safe asleep, Willa Edgeworth kissed Isaiah Oakley again, and this time, neither of them held anything back. The last of the snow melted into the earth by mid-March, leaving the soil damp and dark around Isaiah's cabin. Willa stood ankle-deep in it, sleeves rolled above her elbows, a trowel in one hand and a sack of potato seed in the other. Mora knelt nearby, quiet, focused, lining out furrows with the handle of a hoe. The silence between them was steady, not strained. It was the kind that came when words weren't necessary. Inside, Isaiah sawed boards for a new chicken coop, his shoulders moving with quiet rhythm. The sun cut through the pine trees behind the cabin, and smoke from the stove curled up into the sky, faint and steady. The air smelled of thawed pine needles and wet dirt. "You two been out there near an hour," Isaiah called through the open door. "If you're trying to plant the whole territory, I'll have to trade for more seed." Willa straightened, pushing a strand of hair out of her eyes with the back of her wrist. "You'll thank me in August when you've got enough potatoes to feed half Johnson County." Mora looked up. "Do we really eat this many potatoes?" "You do," Willa said, nudging her with her boot. "You're hollow as a gopher tunnel." Isaiah stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a cloth. "There's a man passing through from Buffalo, says he's headed to Cheyenne. He's got a cart full of books, if you can believe it." Mora perked up. "Books? He said he'd trade for eggs or preserves if we've got any to spare." Willa leaned on the hoe handle. "We could give him the rest of the chokecherry jelly. I've had enough of it to last me till doomsday." Isaiah looked at her, a flicker of something quiet in his eyes. "You didn't say so. You didn't ask." They held each other's gaze a moment too long. Mora ducked her head and went back to planting. That night, Willa sat cross-legged on a blanket near the hearth, teaching Mora how to mend a tear in her only good dress. Isaiah lingered at the table, carving notches into a pine board. He didn't say what the notches were for, and Willa didn't ask. But when she glanced at them, her brow furrowed slightly. "Were you ever married?" she said, not looking up from the needle in her hand. Isaiah's knife slowed. "No, but you were going to be." He set the blade down, fingers resting lightly around the hilt. "Her name was Ruth. She got sick the winter after I came back from Montana. Fever didn't let go." Willa nodded once, eyes on the thread she was pulling through the fabric. "I'm sorry. Me too." The fire popped. Mora yawned and leaned her head on Willa's shoulder. Willa wrapped an arm around her, steady and quiet. Isaiah watched the two of them, then stood to add more wood to the stove. "You thinking of heading back east?" Willa looked at him. "There's nothing east of here I need." His hands stilled on the stove door. "And west," she gave a small shake of her head. "I've been running too long. I'd rather plant things, watch them grow." Isaiah didn't answer, but when he turned, there was something settled in his face. He walked past her, picked up his coat, and stepped outside into the early dark. Willa stood a moment later, kissed Mora's hair, and followed him out. He was leaning against the corral fence, moonlight silvering the brim of his hat. She folded her arms against the cold. "You always leave the room when you feel something." He didn't look at her. "No. Just when I'm not sure what to do with it. I'm standing right here. I know." She moved beside him, close enough that their arms brushed. "I don't scare easy, Isaiah." He turned then. "I can't give you a smooth life. It's rough ground here, and I don't have more than a piece of land and a few tools to work it. I don't need smooth, I need honest." A long breath left him. "I keep a rifle by the door. I check the traps every morning. I don't sleep through thunder, and I don't talk more than I feel." "I know," she said. "I've been here." He looked down at her, and for the first time since they met, his hand rose to her face, rough thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I never wanted anything steady again," he said. "But you're in the ground now, like spring roots." Willa leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "Then let me grow here." They stayed that way, close, unmoving, as the wind swept over the hills and the cabin light glowed warm behind them. When they went inside, he reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation. Neither of them said another word that night, but when she lay beside him, her head tucked beneath his chin, and their fingers laced together beneath the quilt, it was the first time in years either of them truly slept. By April, the river had risen with snowmelt, carving a silver path through the hills beyond Isaiah's land. Willa sat on the bank with her boots off, and her skirt hiked to her knees, feet dipped in the cold current. Her toes turned pink in the chill, but she didn't move. A willow branch bobbed downstream and caught on a rock. Isaiah came up behind her, the fishing line he'd cut from his pole still looped around one hand. "You trying to freeze yourself again?" She looked over her shoulder. "I wanted to feel something sharp." He crouched beside her, the creek gurgling between them. "You've been quiet since the man with the books came through." He asked if we were married. Isaiah didn't answer right away. He picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd ask you." He gave a dry breath of a laugh, more surprise than humor. "You planning to propose?" "I thought about it." She pulled her feet from the water, wiped them with the hem of her petticoat, and looked him full in the face. "I never pictured myself staying anywhere, not even as a child. I always had one eye on the door." Her voice dropped. "But yesterday I caught myself thinking about where we dig a root cellar." Isaiah's hand stilled on the pole. "You want to build something here?" "I already am." He stood and offered his hand. She took it, her fingers damp and cold against his. He didn't let go. "There's a ridge beyond the south pasture," he said. "Good view, no windbreak, but plenty of sky. I was thinking of building a second cabin there." Willa tilted her head. "Why?" "For Mora. Once she's grown. That way she can stay if she wants to, or go knowing she's got a place to come back to." Willa's throat worked before she spoke. "You already thought of that?" Isaiah nodded. "We've both been rootless. I don't want her feeling like she has to be." They walked back to the cabin slow, the grass squishing wet beneath their boots. Mora was on the porch, sewing a torn hem with her brow furrowed the way Willa sometimes did when she was thinking too hard. Later, after supper, Isaiah brought a small wooden box from the trunk at the foot of his bed. He didn't open it, just set it in Willa's hands. "My father carved it for my mother the winter before their last," he said. "She kept her sewing needles in it. After she passed, I kept it for no good reason." Willa opened the lid. Inside was a ring plain, but smooth with wear, the silver dulled by time. It looked like it had been passed through years of hands that knew what it meant to keep something close. "I don't need an answer now," he said. "But if you decide to stay, I want you to have something that lasts." She didn't cry, though her mouth trembled once before she smiled, a quiet, crooked thing that settled in her face like it belonged there. "I'm staying," she said. "And I want to wear it." Isaiah exhaled like something inside him had unhooked. He took the ring and slid it onto her finger, his hands steady despite the weight of it. That night, Mora curled up near the stove with her new book, and Isaiah and Willa sat on the porch steps, knees touching, the stars crowding the sky above them. The air smelled like damp pine and earth, and the wind was slow, almost warm. "You ever wonder if peace feels too quiet after a life like ours?" she asked. He took her hand in both of his. "No, I think it sounds like this." She rested her head on his shoulder, and he leaned into her, their silhouettes folded into the dark like they had always been meant to fit there. The river kept running, the ground kept softening, and the life they were building grew steady beneath their feet, unexpected and unshakable. By late May, the wind had softened in the Wyoming hills, and the ground held enough warmth that Isaiah could work shirtless in the fields without catching a chill. He moved through the rows of young corn and beans slowly, checking each plant for signs of blight. Willa watched him from the fence line, arms folded, a faint unease working beneath her ribs. She hadn't told him yet. Behind her, Mora hung linens on the line, humming tunelessly under her breath. The girl had grown steadier since the thaw, her eyes less watchful, her laugh easier. That ease made it harder for Willa to speak. She stepped down from the fence and crossed the yard, boots brushing against the growing ryegrass. Isaiah looked up when she stopped near the furrows. "I got a letter," she said, voice low. He straightened. "From where?" "Jasper County." "From a neighbor we knew when we were little. She wrote to say Randall Greaves's brother is stirring trouble there, wants revenge for what happened here." Isaiah bent and pulled a weed from around a bean sprout. "He know you're alive?" "I don't think so." "But she wrote that he's been asking about a woman with a scar over her right brow, said she shot his brother down in Wyoming territory." Isaiah didn't speak for a long moment. Then he stood and wiped his hands on his trousers. "How close is he to anyone who'd know your name?" "Too close. And if he doesn't find me, he might go after anyone who helped me." Isaiah's hand found the back of his neck. "You're thinking of leaving?" "I thought about it." He nodded once and looked past her toward the hills. "And now, I'm still standing here." The silence between them wasn't heavy, but it held weight. Isaiah finally said, "You're not alone in this, you never were." He nodded toward the porch where Mora now sat with a book open on her lap. "Does she know?" "Not yet." "I wanted to tell you first." Isaiah stepped closer, his voice quieter now. "I can send word to the sheriff in Buffalo, let him know what's stirring in Jasper. If Greaves's brother crosses into this territory, we can be ready." Willa looked up at him. "You sure about that? I've built something here, so have you. I won't let fear push us out of it." She looked toward the sky, watching a hawk cut across the blue. "I keep waiting for it to feel safe." "Safety's not a feeling," he said. "It's a choice. We make it every day we stay." That night, Willa sat with Mora on the porch steps, the girl's head resting against her shoulder. Isaiah leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Do you remember what home smelled like when we were little?" Mora asked. Willa brushed a hand through her sister's hair. "Cornbread and myrtle soap. And that old stove that always smoked too much." Isaiah stepped down from the doorway and sat beside them. "We could build another stove, one that smokes less." Mora looked up. "You do that, if it makes this place feel more like yours." Later, after Mora had gone to bed, Willa knelt beside the hearth, dropping kindling into the stove's belly. Isaiah sat nearby, oiling the hinges of the door that had started to stick. "She's not a child anymore," Willa said. "No, she's looking to me for more than protection now. She's watching how I live." Isaiah set the oil can down. "You're giving her something to follow." Willa turned, the firelight catching in her eyes. "I want her to trust that love can stay. That it doesn't have to leave just because the past tries to call it away." Isaiah moved closer. "Then let's show her." He took her hands gently, thumbs brushing over her knuckles. "We'll face what may come, together." She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his. "I'm not afraid of what's coming anymore, not if I face it with you." Outside, The wind turned warm across the fields, and the cabin stood steady against the soft hush of night. Inside, the fire glowed low, and two hands stayed folded together, not out of fear, but out of something stronger, something chosen. June brought long days and gold light that stretched well into evening. The land outside the cabin had changed without ceremony. Rows of rye stood waist-high, and the cornstalks had begun to tassel. The earth had taken Isaiah's steady hands and Willa's sharp eye and given something back that grew green and sure. They worked side by side most days, with Mora often nearby, hauling water or stringing drying lines for herbs hung in bunches beneath the porch eaves. Nothing about their rhythm felt new anymore. It had settled into place like a door finally hung straight on its hinges. One afternoon, Willa stood at the edge of the pasture, eyes narrowed against the sun. A rider approached from the south trail, his horse lathered and dusty, his coat marked with the red slash of a territorial ranger. Isaiah stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers, and met the man halfway across the yard. "Isaiah Oakley?" the ranger asked, voice gravel thick from dust. Isaiah nodded, and Willa joined him a moment later, her face unreadable. There was a man matching Greaves's brother's description seen near the Tongue River, but he turned east, the ranger said. "We've reason to believe he's gone back across the Dakota line. We'll keep eyes out, but the threat's past for now." Willa didn't speak, only let out a breath and pressed her hand briefly to her chest. "Appreciate the word," Isaiah said, offering the man a dipper of water. "You'll stay?" "Can't. We're riding for Fort McKinney before dark." When the ranger left, Isaiah looked over at Willa, who had turned back toward the pasture. She wasn't smiling, but something had shifted. That night they sat beneath the cottonwood behind the cabin, where Isaiah had strung two chairs from old wagon seats. The air smelled of cut grass and warm wood, and insects hummed low in the brush. "Do you ever miss who you were before?" Willa asked. Isaiah tipped his head, considering. "I miss the idea of him, the man I thought I might become, but not what he was. I used to think I'd never be anything but hunted," she said. "Even when I wasn't running, I was still looking over my shoulder. Not anymore." She reached for his hand, their fingers folding together like the pages of a well-read book. "I want to marry you before the first frost. I want Mora to have a place that doesn't shift beneath her feet. And I want to wake up beside you even when the roof groans with snow." He looked at her like he was memorizing her face. "We'll do it right. There's a preacher in Casey. We can ride in before the harvest." "I want the vows said out loud," she added, voice soft. "I want her to hear them. She will." 2 weeks later, they rode into town with Mora between them, her dress cleaned and her boots shined. The preacher's wife offered a simple white shawl for Willa, and Isaiah wore the same dark coat he'd been baptized in 20 years before. They stood beneath the cottonwoods behind the church, the same kind that grew behind their home, and spoke promises that needed no flourish. Mora stood with her hands folded and didn't cry until the preacher said, "Let them be joined, and let no fear follow them." When they returned home, Isaiah lifted Willa from the saddle and carried her across the porch, though she protested with half a laugh and a kiss to his temple. "I can walk," she said, "but I can carry," he answered. That night, after Mora had gone to bed and the cabin was wrapped in warm silence, Willa pulled the shawl from her shoulders and sat beside the hearth, her knees drawn up. Isaiah knelt before her, resting his head against her chest, arms wrapped around her waist. "I used to think a life like this wasn't meant for me," she whispered into his hair. "And now, I think I was just walking the long way to find it." They spent that night with the windows open, the curtains stirring in the wind, and the sound of crickets threading through the dark. There was no fear left between them, only the quiet bond of two people who had chosen each other across fire and winter and silence. Years passed. The second cabin was built on the ridge by the third spring, with Mora helping to lay the stone hearth herself. She didn't leave, not right away, though she did ride into Buffalo to apprentice with the woman who ran the mercantile. Isaiah surprised Willa with a row of apple saplings one mild March morning, and she planted each without speaking, her hands deep in the soil. By the 6th year, the orchard bore fruit. They never spoke Randall Greaves's name again. Some shadows don't follow where light is strong enough. Willa kept the carved box on the mantel. Isaiah built her a writing desk near the window, and she filled the drawers with seed packets, folded maps, and letters from Mora when she finally left to marry a quiet-eyed schoolteacher from Johnson County. In the evenings, Isaiah read aloud by lamplight, and Willa mended or shelled peas or simply listened. When he reached for her hand, she always gave it, and when she laughed, he always looked up just to see it. When she turned 60, he gave her a brass locket with a pressed rye stem inside. She wore it every day afterward. They grew old without bitterness. They grew old with grace, and when the first snow fell each year, they stood in the doorway together, side by side, and watched it cover the land they had built with calloused hands and quiet love. They never left. They never needed to.